Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Don't Risk It podcast presented by VFIS Client Risk Solutions. This program focuses on the exposures our clients frequently encounter and discusses some potential solutions to help reduce these exposures. I'm your host, Chris Rodgers with VFIS Client Risk Solutions, and today we're talking with Woody Sullivan. Woody is an education specialist from our Education and Training Division at VFIS, and he's joining us today to discuss the concept of crew resource management and how your organization can adopt some of these principles. Woody, I want to thank you for joining me today, and it's a pleasure to have you on the program.
Well, Chris, it's good to be here. I really appreciate you taking the time today to talk to me about crew resource management.
Absolutely. So with what you just said there, can you define for our listeners who may not know what crew resource management is?
Well, the official definition of crew resource management is the effective use of all available resources for EMS and fire crew personnel to assure a safe and efficient operation, to reduce error, reduce injury, avoid stress, and also it will help increase efficiency on the scene. It is just a very powerful communication practice tool.
Can you go into a little bit of the history of how crew resource management was developed?
Absolutely. Crew resource management was routed out of the aviation industry back in the 80s. NASA had reached out to airline industry, airline industry had reached out to NASA to help improve communication within the between the pilot and crew in the cab, because there were some bad outcome airline crashes in the 70s. So they came up with this model about how they can better communicate in the cab of the aircraft, and that communication needs to be redundant. And so all the history is routed out of the aviation industry.
So what is humanware?
So humanware is basically the concept of, you got different components. You have the software that runs the programs that we use every day. We have the hardware, which are the communication equipment and mobile data terminals, but the humanware is the human asset, the people part of the team, and how we solve problems. Because the philosophy is on the humanware is we all take different journeys to get to where we're at in our careers. We all have different ways of solving problems, and humanware opens the door to where we can have discussions about how to solve problems as a team approach versus solving problems as an individual. So humanware is basically the human component of crew resource management.
So culture is it's a trigger word or a trending word in emergency services. Does culture apply, or is it related to crew resource management?
Oh, absolutely. The definition of culture, the culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior the leader is willing to tolerate. So in crew resource management, the team is the strength. So the newest person on the team and the most senior person on our team, when they become equal within that crew resource philosophy, that if a younger crew resource member sees something that's going sideways, they are to speak up and identify these problems. And the culture normally within the emergency services, there's that hierarchy where I'm a battalion chief, or I'm a lieutenant, or I'm a captain, and you're a rookie. You really don't have a place to say anything if you see something. So the change in the culture is that we communicate better between up and down the flow chain of command, and how to address challenges we might encounter in the field, and create that positive culture that we are there to provide efficient, safe emergency response for not only for ourselves, but for our customers and our citizens.
So how do we measure ourselves at developing a learning culture, or how do we go about doing it? And another question, why do we do it in regards to developing a learning culture?
Learning cultures are powerful, as that you should learn something from every call or every situation, whether it's a emergency call, responding to a call. You take time to foster an environment where it's something like near miss training, where if you've had almost an accident, you come back and you debrief, for what we call hot wash. You review calls of like structure fires, pin ins, cardiac arrest, and you create that learning culture within that team to strengthen it, to identify our strengths and weaknesses. And then, as an example, I could be really good at running cardiac arrest, but I'm really bad at handling OBGYN calls or delivering babies. So we understand our strengths and weaknesses of our team, and then we identify how to strengthen me as an individual to be able to be more confident in delivering a baby, as an example. So the team has got to be open to after actions and honest communication amongst the team members to be able to say, okay, you do really good here, I'm not so strong here, so let's team up and let's both bring ourselves up to a competency level that we can both be very efficient at our jobs. And that learning culture is powerful because we've all know cultures where, you're a student, and that's just where you're at in precepting. And if a senior medic doesn't want you to do something, even though the world's changed and the education's changed, you just kind of, you run into that wall, if that makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the example of a near miss program and relating it to culture, because that is an absolute culture buy-in, because as you mentioned, an accident didn't happen, but we almost had one. And so you have to rely on the individuals to go up to leadership and tell them, like, look, I made a mistake. Let's let other people learn from this. So it's definitely a change in culture or a change in mindset in some organizations.
And near miss training, I talk about this a lot with organizations I visit throughout the years, that near miss training needs to be non-punitive, open communication, because there are lessons to be learned from near misses, whether you almost hit something, you almost administer a wrong medication, or you almost fell through the floor. Why did you do not to do that? And you take those lessons learned and back to your team, to maybe that one thing you did will help somebody else from getting in trouble later. And so I'm a strong proponent of near miss training.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to get a buy-in if it's strict, if it has a punitive measure to it, or if it's strictly punitive.
Right.
So removing that component of it, you're definitely going to get more buy-in.
Right.
So can you define normalization? Pardon me. Can you define normalization of deviance as related to CRM?
Yeah, no, normalization of deviance is basically a lowering of standard of performance is accepted until a lower standard becomes a normal. And in crew resource management, where that applies is like unsafe practices. Whether you don't use your spotter, you don't verbalize medications before you administer it. Hey, I'm about to push X med, and you say that out loud so your other team members can say, okay, we concur with that, and that's a safe practice. And not using spotters, and not communicating and having the courage to say, hey, look, you need to get out of the truck. I don't care if it's raining, and spot me. Because as you know, one of the largest areas that we have a problem with within VFIS community is stationary strikes, and not having that communication between the driver and the spotter is huge. And normalization and deviance is basically you're changing that bar to cut, much like the definition of culture. Your bad behavior becomes a new normal behavior. And in crew resource management, you really talk a lot about that complacency kills, and that complacency hurts the team, and it becomes pervasive as a cancer within the organization. So true crew resource management opens up that communication stream.
Yeah, complacency can definitely set in when we go into the backing aspect of an apparatus. As you said, we have a lot of incidents of striking fixed objects. Backing are often a reason behind that, and it's not a stretch that we go from hitting a pole or hitting a gate or hitting the station to hitting a provider or someone on the scene. So having complacency set in is definitely, as you said, could be a cancer for the organization.
Right, exactly.
So what are some of the individual challenges when it comes to developing a CRM? Is it a challenging work environment? Non-discretionary and discretionary time? What are some examples of challenges in this area?
Challenges within the is really learning how to better communicate and understanding that you need to define non-discretionary time and discretionary time. And that comes out of that Gordon Graham matrix of non-discretionary time is when you don't have a lot of time to make a decision and you don't have a lot of information to base that decision on. So that's critical to really bring the team together under career resource management under those high stress situations and improve your communication and use the strength of the team. Discretionary time is really about you've got a minute to make a decision. You know what I'm saying? It's not a decision that's do or die at that moment. So some of the challenges are under that non-discretionary time about the time compression, how complex the dynamics of the event, what are some of the dangerous variables, and how to better communicate and tap the resources of the team from your weakest person to your strongest person. What I have found over the years is we all have an attribute of strength. It's not that you always make the decision yourself. You just surround yourself by really good people, right? That have value in these situations where you can't be a subject matter expert in everything. So that's where a lot of your individual challenges is admitting to yourself that you're not a subject matter expert in everything. And you look to people on your team that in that particular situation would be a subject matter expert. And that will help you get through these challenging work environments, will help you better manage that non-discretionary and discretionary time and deal with time compression and help maybe bring more information to the table so you make an informed decision versus making a decision based on less than all the information needed, if that makes sense to you, Chris.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Right now is one of the first times, I think it might be the first time in history that we have 5 generations in the workforce, and we're all going to have different means of communication or different methods of doing it, which creates some barriers. So how can barriers be broken down to achieve a collective situational awareness during critical events, keeping in mind that, all these different learning mentalities?
Well, I think that's a really good question, Chris, because one of the things you first got to identify within yourself under self-reflection is on a team is when you're out there operating, there's definitely a place for a hierarchy and a chain of command. Absolutely, there's a place for that. But you also got to think about the strength of the team, right? And knowing that sometimes we're all equal. If you've been here a week and you've been here 20 years and the person sees an unsafe practice or something dangerous about to occur and the person at the lead of the chain of the command doesn't see it, it's the 100% the culture of CRM is that the person at the weakest link that sees the problem identifies the problem and says something and has the courage to say something. And that's how you break down barriers, is talk about situational awareness, being able to open up and change that culture where you say, okay, when we're on an event and you see me about to push a wrong medication, or you see a roof about to collapse in where I don't see it on the others, you step up and you say something, you know what I mean? And you communicate that in a way, that's respectful, but you get the point across, hey, there's a problem. We need to reevaluate what we're doing. And the only way to break these barriers down is to change the culture to where you make it okay to communicate up and downstream. And you said something very powerful a minute ago. You really got to think about your audience, right? How I communicate at 59 years old is different than the new folks coming in 18, 19, and 20. And we've got to sit down and figure out how we bridge these two universes together, right? Or these two ecosystems together so that we know how we each talk and communicate. And the only way to do that is sit down in a room sometimes and say, okay, do you understand my perspective? Do I understand your perspective? And how do we come together? Because it can't always be my way. You know what I mean? On a team.
Yes, sir. And to echo something that you said, it's very important to establish that culture in your organization if you're going to get for lack of a better phrase, the lowest man on the totem pole to notice or to identify something and call someone out who could be a veteran in the department. So you have to establish that culture and let and reinforce it self-reporting or reporting something that you saw regardless of rank in the organization is a very important factor to get your crews to understand.
Absolutely. Agree with you 100%.
So what is an open communication model in CRM?
The open communication model is the basic principle of saying to you as Woody Sullivan, I've been here a week. Chris, you've been with the organization 25 years. The open communication model is that I have the same ability to communicate upstream and downstream as you do. You know what I mean? That just because I'm a junior person within the organization, I'm not just to sit there and be quiet. And open communication models is that you can sit in a room and you can talk about the event or talk about what happened in a positive way, and own it as a learning event, not a criticizing event. And you've got to be able to open that up to the entire organization, because I think we've all seen organizations where that it is a closed communication concept where you don't feed information upstream and the information doesn't come back downstream. So you got to identify first if there is a problem, and then identify how do you change that problem, and just understand that a lot of that's about self-reflection, about how I manage my team, and do I really want that open communication model? Because some people don't want it, but that again is unhealthy within the organization, because you got to have open and free communications to be able to better perform our jobs.
Well, I'm guessing that, I mean, even amongst in an organization, even the shifts can get siloed a little bit, because each shift is not going to experience the same things, and if there's not an open communication model, there's not a real mechanism for us to discuss the issues or the challenges that each shift is facing if they're siloed and not openly communicating to leadership and amongst each other.
Well, some of the other elements are communication skills are vital to the success of any situation. And how do you send the message? Make sure you send it clear. Make sure you are concise. Make sure you're informative. Make sure you're not using slang, jargon, 10 codes, or these types of things. Listen carefully. And one of the most important things is confirm what is being said to you. And if it needs to be clarified, have it clarified. Observe the speaker. Where we get in a lot of trouble is we do not confirm what's being said to us. You know what I mean? We'll get an order downstream, and that order, we might perceive it one thing, but we might have a bunch of things going on where we don't hear the entirety of the order. So it's important to read back to whoever's giving you an order, so you make sure you have that clear, concise, open communication. Because ambiguity is death. Use of unclear language, avoid jargon. But ambiguity is not healthy within any communication model.
Absolutely. So what is the circle of success that a CRM program encompasses?
CRM programs that are successful will help you develop better situational awareness. It will promote better problem solving. It helps with better decision making, because you're working as a team now, not as an individual. Leadership will improve, followership will improve, and one of the most important things that I always believe in is personal self-awareness to what's going on around you and how healthy is your team.
So we kind of talked about this a little earlier when we talked about the near miss program, but I want to go into it a little bit and expand on it a little bit further. What's the importance of an after action near miss, or or a hot wash, whatever verbiage you want to use? But what's the importance of having one of these programs in place?
Well, I think it's extremely important. I think how we learn is by our prior actions, right? Whether they were, after actions aren't designed to only search out the negative, right? After actions are what some folks call a hot wash, are also to identify what's working correctly and well within an organization. Is this particular best practice working? Is it being tested? Is it correct? And is there anything we need to do to improve it? But the second piece is the part where something came off the rails, per se, and did not turn out the way you wanted it to. And there was a piece of equipment, an injury, or God forbid, a death. And you've got to really be willing to sit down and have that open communication within your organization and team to say, okay, ask those tough questions. What happened? Why did it happen? How can we make sure to reassure this doesn't happen again? And open that up to the team. And not in a punitive way or a discipline way, but use it as a learning tool. And that's one of the ground rules that I used to set within some of our after actions. This is a learning evolution. This is not to assign blame, because we're a blame society. We need to find somebody to blame sometimes. This is not what the purpose of this is. This is to learn, to really own what happened, and review it, and develop better best practices or better training procedures or better communication procedures to ensure that this just doesn't happen again. So after actions are a very powerful tool.
You mentioned that, getting the group together and discussing these things, but is there some introspection that's involved in this? I assume that you're talk about it as a group, but what about how do you handle this individually?
Introspection is a powerful tool as well, because one of the first things you got to ask yourself as a leader, and I look at leaders not as officers, but everybody. The collective is leaders, from your most junior person on the fire truck or an ambulance or an EMS unit to the most senior person in an organization. You all have a leadership role at some level. And the first thing you got to ask yourself, especially if something's gone wrong, is what part of this incident was I responsible for? You got to go down an internal check sheet and be honest with yourself. Look in the mirror and say, hey, look, did I contribute to any of this behavior? Did I allow the normalcy of deviance to creep in? Did I allow this complacency to creep in? And did I own any part of this? And what corrective actions do I need to make in myself to ensure this doesn't happen again, right?
Absolutely.
Because I learned over many years of being in leadership that there are situations that occurred that one of the first things I identified was that, hey, maybe I didn't do 100% of what I was supposed to be doing to ensure this bad outcome. I wasn't doing enough training for my teams. I wasn't communicating a clear, concise communication. There was ambiguity in the message or something. You had to look at yourself, because you've got to be honest with yourself before you can be truthful and honest with the crew members, and get them to have that respect and open communication back to you. If they see you doing introspection, then they will own that part. And you don't look at, and introspection can't be viewed as a weakness. Introspection, to me, is a strength to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, man, I just didn't do a good job here, or I dropped the ball here, and I need to own that. I don't think there's anything wrong as a leader admitting that to your team, that, hey, look, man, I own part of this too. So we got to look at this holistically and say, hey, how do we move forward from here? What can we do to ensure these things do not happen? None of this, in my opinion, works, of all the things we talked about today, if you're not willing to sit down and look at yourself and do that personal introspection.
So, Woody, it's a great point that you made there, and a lot of great points that we've talked about over the conversation. Does VFIS have a resource or any type of assistance for crew resource management?
Yeah, we just got approved for our own crew resource management awareness class. We have basically two models. We have a half-day model, 4-hour model. We have an 8-hour model that incorporates crew resource management and risk control for mid-level manager program as one. And so I think it's a powerful tool just to start the conversation. This is the tip of the iceberg conversation. Crew resource management has got to be embraced by organization as a lifestyle change for moving forward. Because it's not a one and done. Crew resource management training philosophy is not, oh, I went to a CRM class and now I'm CRM. No, CRM is a lifestyle change within that organization to change that culture.
Perfect. Well, we'll certainly include references to any of those materials in the comments. And Woody, I want to thank you again for joining us. It's a pleasure to chat with you, and thanks for hopping on board.
Well, I appreciate you, Chris, and thank you for doing this today.
Yes, sir. And I want to thank you for listening to the program and for your interest in VFIS safety resources. I want to thank our guest, Woody Sullivan, once again for his time and information. Please consider subscribing to our program to stay up to date on new content releases. Also, if you like what you've heard, please consider leaving a review below. For more information about the many resources available from VFIS, please visit VFIS.com. And to submit ideas for future discussions, please reach out by emailing VFISriskcontrol@VFIS.com. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day. The views, information, or opinions expressed during this program are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Gladfelter Insurance Group, VFIS, and its employees.